So welcome to the panel. So we've heard already a lot about Songdo, and I only like to sum up a bit what the topic will be tonight to put us all on track. So I think what's the fact is that 70% of the world population will live in cities until 2050. People will live in cities which either are existing or have to be built from scratch, such as Songdo in Korea. Most of the people will live in cities in Asia or Africa. And we heard about already about the problems the cities are facing, such as traffic jams, air pollution, urban heat, economic crisis, immigration, and socio-demographic problems. So how do we solve such problems? Is a smart city such as Songdo the solution for those challenges? How our cities communicate with us, and how can we interact with the city? What is the role of human beings in order to design or transform future cities? How can we use data in a smart way? What is smart? So within that context, we like to discuss the city model of Songdo as smart city, but also further concepts we've heard about already, such as a sharing or a responsive city. So, but first of all, I like to introduce the panelists. It's great that you are here. You are all experts in that field in one or another way. You look at it from different perspectives, which is great. And it's wonderful that you are here and that you will contribute to this discussion. I will start with you.
Okay.
Is it okay with the sound, actually? I have the feeling there's something going. It's fine? That's fine. Okay. So I will start with you.
Okay.
As our special guest coming all the way from Korea to us.
Thank you for invitation.
You are trained in Korea and in the United States.
Correct.
You worked in Rotterdam for the Rem Koolhaas architecture firm OME.
Yes.
At the time they had commissioned the first, had been commissioned to develop the first master plan of Songdo in the late 80s.
90s.
In the late 90s?
98.
Oh, I said 89. No? Okay. But then further on in the late 90s, you co-founded your architecture firm in New York.
Ah.
And then 2003, you moved back to Korea,
Correct.
to Seoul.
Yes.
You found your own architecture firm there called Mess Studies.
Yes.
And I think you have a very unique artistic and conceptual, mainly conceptual approach of how you define space and how it manifests in certain shapes in order to create new cultural environments and social interaction. So my question, how is it or how was it for you to come back to Korea, to work there as an architect, also with having in mind your background of trained and working in Europe and the United States as well. Also maybe someone like an architect like Rem Koolhaas, how he influenced work, maybe your work, and how do you combine this, like in the tension of tradition and modernism, so having the Korean roots.
Yes, that's kind of also try to relate to the actual subject today, but for me, first of all, I'm by no means expert in a smart city. Actually, it's very abstract to me. So I want to hear more about it. But when I was invited here, I was actually excited, and it was coincidence because you didn't know that I was very much involved. Somehow, and very personally, my last project that I did when I had a period of working for someone, which would be the Rem Koolhaas, 98. My last project was Songdo. It was before KPF, 98. I worked on the competition stage first 6 months, which ended up winning over Gensler and Neon Seke. There were 3 firms from all over the place. And then somehow, and then it kind of, almost 20 years of history. And then for the last 3 years, I somehow choose to get involved as somewhat critically participating as an architect, because I have my firm for the last 14 years in Seoul, to sort of understand the situation and also contribute as a design, maybe for architecture and urban ideas. So, I mean, to answer your question,
yes.
I mean, the Songdo is extremely unique place, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about tradition, Korea, especially urbanistically, as Julia mentioned, it's what was known, I mean, what we had before maybe 100 years ago is completely inverted, the urban population ratio and so on, but also it's one of the densest and biggest city now, so where I'm based, it's not something that, it kind of goes beyond the tradition. I mean, we did have our own, let's say, feng shui based, sort of a much more, sort of a smaller scale and much more concerned with natures and so on, because Korea is about 70% occupied with very mountainous, almost Swiss-like situation. But this is almost a Dutch-like situation that is, in fact, maybe that has to do with why a Dutch firm had won in the first place.
Oh, okay.
So for me, Korea gives an incredible diverse opportunity in terms of spatial or urban conditions, but also
so is that a challenge, or is that what you are interested in as an architect when you work in Korea?
Yes, yes. I think that was what I kind of rediscovered my own background when I came back after many years of kind of absorbing other influences. And this is surely the very
and can you contribute
case.
something what you learned from, for example?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But should I get into more, or I don't know? Maybe.
No, we keep it as it is.
Yeah,
and then, okay, so then I get to you, Brian. You are here tonight instead of Julian Cross, so we had some changes here, but you are actually, it's great that you are here, and you are actually a real expert according to the Masterplan of Songdo. For example, you designed the whole block. It's called the First World. It's a block which is a residential community with a multi-tower complex comprising of 2,500 residential units.
It was the first block built in Songdo.
Live
Hence
workspaces.
The name, First World.
Okay. Retail with a network of public open spaces. And KPF is a global corporation with about 500 employees and 25 partners and offices all over the world. You are one of the partners. The company has developed many master plans all over the world in various scales, from city development such as Earl's Court Village in London for approximately 30,000 citizens to Songdo planned for 70,000.
Sorry, Earl's Court's only 10,000.
10,000?
Yeah, only 10,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but there is this dimension, right? You scale of scaling, and I was wondering, how is it to plan a city from scratch, or to have this chunk of land, and what are the parameters, or how do you start to plan?
Well, in London it's a bit easier because you're usually responding to existing context. It's very rich, has many layers of history. Reclaimed land is very different. So all we had really was the sea, hence seawater and canals forming an armature for the overall master plan. Although I wasn't involved in the conception of the original master plan, my colleague James van Klemperer did that. But I joined about 2 years later to do that first block, which also has a canal. But you just have the sea and the landscape, and you also have the culture. And we looked carefully at how Koreans lived, existing settlement patterns, and then speculated about how things could be a little bit different, and worked with Korean architects throughout. And I think that the culture actually can inspire spatial configurations. And for that first residential scheme, we did take that into consideration. So the culture is its own context, even in a tabula rasa scheme, that can inspire many different ideas and forms and environments.
I think you also mentioned something quite interesting. You said a city, even if you build it from scratch, it somehow has to be incomplete.
Well, a master plan has to assume a degree of incompletion, I think, because it just takes so long and so much energy to realize these. So in a way, an imperfect plan is better than a perfect plan, because a perfect plan might always be missing one element. But if you can plan for incompletion, it may be a more normal place.
So that's something...
or to make a plan that's open-ended so that people can add layers, and over time the plan can evolve. So a perfect master plan, or a kind of utopian master plan, is inherently maybe doomed to be imperfect. So maybe start from a different aspiration.
So it's imperfect in terms of to make it more real?
From the beginning, my understanding of Songdo was all about delivery, because there had been a long delay. They had reclaimed the land at great expense, and then there was the IMF crisis, and IDEO, the big corporation, had a severe financial problem. So the government really just wanted something to happen and wanted to put people together and make it happen. So it could not be an idealistic or utopian scheme that couldn't be realized. It had to be all about implementation. Some of the infrastructure had already been built, I think, from the OMA scheme. So there was already a kind of context of ideas to which we were building.
Okay. So then we continue with Monica. Monica, you are an urban sociologist with a PhD in quality of life in the information society. Your main research interest is the investigation of new technologies such as sensors and thereby generated data, and its impact on society and social change in the context of smart cities. And you picture the fact that billions of sensors will connect people, objects, and data as an opportunity to allow people to share the data needed in order to connect people in a peer-to-peer network. And you were asking yourself how to integrate sharing economy tools and data in order to offer a better life. Therefore, you researched the model of a sharing city. So what is a sharing city, and what are some scenarios or business models based on a sharing economy?
I like to think to the sharing city like a kind of daughter of the smart city, because the concept of smart cities reminds to technologies, infrastructures, mobile device penetration, high penetration of mobile device in the everyday life of people. And so in a smart city there are the conditions to favor the development and the spread of the sharing economy. And so of all these practices of peer-to-peer exchange, of swap, bartering, but many other different forms are developing, like crowdfunding, but also social street, co-housing. And we can think to the sharing economy like a kind of flux, and from one side we have a kind of practices, on the other side we have another kind of practices, and in the middle we have many different forms. And we can define two types of sharing economy: the transformational sharing economy that point and aims to create community among people, and another type, the transactional, that is more focuses on make profits and create sometimes corporate forms of sharing economy, reproducing the old form of capitalism that they demonstrate to have some limits today. And so, in my opinion, studying the smart city, first of all, we can define the sharing city a sort of human way to the smart city, because the focus is on people and the ability of people. And at the same time, a city that wants to integrate this kind of practices to give citizens new alternatives should create the condition, the right ecosystem to let these practices spread and develop. And so it should first of all recognize the intelligence, the collective intelligence of people, and act, especially in terms of government, like a partner state that favor this kind of new practices, recognizing also potentialities but also limits of this kind of practices, because, as I told you, there are different forms and also not always positive effect of this kind of practices that are developing, because sometimes we have problems in terms of job and right in the job market. We have problems of gentrification, for example, and problems of loss of identity of some area because of the penetration of peer-to-peer practices. So it's a good thing to study the evolution of the phenomenon and have a good vision of this kind of practices, and especially of the role that the public administration want to have in terms of promotion, because the public administration is one of the main actors that can that is involved in the process that we are seeing today. So it can actualize the collaborative ideas. It can find new strategies of development for the cities, promoting, but at the same time, it should frame in a normative context the development of this kind of practices. So it's a crucial role, that of the public administration, and it cannot be avoided, of course. And if you want some example of sharing enterprises, for example, I studied the South Korean case of Seoul, and I like many of the sharing enterprises that the Seoul Metropolitan Government selected in its project. Some of them are, for example, Play Planet. Play Planet favor the development of a responsible tourism, trying to transform tourists in change maker, favoring the matching between local host and tourist, and favoring also the economic local development in this matching, in which people can really experience the tradition and the real life of people. And so they propose this platform, because it's a platform, online platform, and they try to collect different local hosts in many spots in Asia, in order to let tourists find alternative experiences, and in order to let them really know the context in which they are traveling, for example. Or another one is Open Closet. Since there is a huge problem in Korea about youth unemployment, for example, and sometimes for the first job interview, people are not ready in terms of, let's say, jacket and suits. This platform collect dress that are usually donated by other people, and offer this service, and so young people can rent actually the suit for the job interview, because it's very important this moment of the interview, especially after university, when they finish university. And so in this way they try to support young people entering in the market.
I think it's interesting, or it may be interesting to say that, or to mention, or to differentiate between companies such as Airbnb and Uber, which are often considered as a sharing economy business model, which it's not? Or you differentiate?
When we talk about sharing economy, actually we use a very broad label in which there are many different things. Also, the big player.
You label it as a rental.
Yes, actually there are rental economies because they are rent stuff, and so actually they are reproducing, as I told before, the old scheme of market. And privilege for someone and not privilege for someone other. And so for some experts, they are not sharing economy because they use the values of the sharing, but today they are very far from these values. Probably at the beginning they start from the value of sharing, of meeting people, of creating new relation, but today Airbnb is one of the big players of the sharing economy, and actually is considered more a rental economy. There are other labels that can be used: on-demand economy for Uber, for example, or gig economy for other practices like we have in Italy. I don't know if there is also abroad Foodora that are bikers that deliver food, and they are without right, actually. So they are creating a wave of precarity in this term. They have no protection and a lot of responsibility.
Okay, maybe later on we come to this point again. Maybe continue with introducing everybody.
Yes.
I'd like to continue with Gerhard Schmitt. Gerhard, you are a professor of information architecture at ETH Zurich. And you also lead the Future Cities laboratory of ETH Singapore, which focuses on the development of new solutions for a sustainable urban future with an Asian perspective. What you are saying is that cities are one of the greatest accomplishments of mankind, have not quite learned to respond to the needs of the inhabitants yet. In order to put the people and their needs in the center of urban planning, you came up with a model of the responsive city. So maybe could you briefly explain, maybe you can briefly explain what is a smart city, and then what is a responsive city as some sort of advancement of a smart city.
Yes, thank you that I can be here and speak to you. A smart city, every century has its own definition of a smart city, and every country has its own definition of that. But if you look at the last developments of the smart city, let's say from the year 2000, it was first a technological answer looking for the question. Then around 2005, it was when the cities had worked with these answers for a while, they started to identify the questions, and then the companies could start to give them answers. It inverted it. But by today, after 2015 at the latest, the citizens of cities produce by far more data than all the other sensors combined. So we need to find a way to put the citizens back into the driver's seat and to give the city back to the citizens. So this is the development that we see, and we would like to think what comes after the smart city. In German, the word smart exists like an Anglicismus, but it is, you can say somebody is smart, but he may or she may not be klug. So it would be we look more for a prudent city or responsive city. And the responsive city we define as a city where all the smart city technology is there, because it exists everywhere, even here, especially in Munich. And but the people can have access to it, and they can control what part of this smart city technology they want to use. And that is a very big step. I think we have to take that step. We have different definitions how far we are in this. As you mentioned in the beginning, in Europe, people are quite afraid of some data they might give away. But I'm totally amazed living in in Asia, in Singapore, and having many students from Asia, from Korea especially, working with them. Already 10, 15 years ago, they were so free in handling data. You know, something we would be totally frozen here. We would never do that. And they could do so much research on this. In this respect, it was good for them. But after this, it was almost locked down. So there was a freedom of using data a while ago, and it's getting more difficult here. Whereas in China, for example, this definition of a smart city starts with urbanization. This is the main goal. And in India, the other big country of smart cities, the definition of smart cities starts with very basic services, clean water, what the Chancellor said before. So we have different definitions, smart cities in every of these countries, in every one of the times. But what is missing a little bit is the people, how they interact with all of this. And therefore, what you said about these sharing economies and really people getting back into the business is extremely important.
Leif? You are an IDEO partner and executive design director at IDEO's Munich studio. And you say about yourself that you are passionate about finding the most impactful ways to bring human-centered brands, products, spaces, and experiences successfully to market. How about cities? So can you explain the human-centered design approach according to, you know, how is this approach applicable or scalable from a product to a service to a city, maybe?
Well, I'm neither an architect nor a specialist in smart city, and thank you for the explanation. It helped me understand that. I was sort of wondering what smart city exactly meant. I think maybe a starting point could be what we might share in this question, what is a smart city? So I come from an industry, I'm an industrial designer by training, and I started at IDEO when we designed products for companies that were produced and sold and at some point disposed of. And I think I come from an industry that's often guilty of starting with technology. And what we try to do early on is starting with people and finding out what is not only desirable in a sort of marketing sense, but how do people behave around a certain activity with products? Like why should this product or this brand be relevant for people? And we try to derive through creating insights, we try to derive a question that we could then answer with design tools such as envisioning an idea, a concept, prototyping it, testing it with people. So this is what we've done early on for products and brands, and we brought that to businesses. So today we help design entire businesses, understanding the purpose, Unternehmenszweck of a business that's often quite questionable, and trying companies to stay relevant to people. And I find it very interesting to apply that to society, because I think we obviously have a lot of societal problems. We have a lot of problems with our environment, and I think looking at not only brands, but looking at entire offers that are relevant for society is very interesting. I'll give you one example. We designed a school system for sort of middle class in Peru. It's a business, so there's an entrepreneur who decided to build a business around creating education for the middle class to help bolster the middle class to create prosperity in that country and lift the level of education